to the Tune-Up, your Wednesday night Bible study. Each week we gather together to tune in to the Word of God, learning and growing as we study how to apply God's Word in our everyday lives. Join us at 7:30 for this powerful Bible study experience. And now, let's get ready for Tune-Up.
Hey, what's going on? What's going on? Welcome back to another Tune-Up podcast streaming live courtesy of Global Outreach Church, aka the Go Church, where our vision is to build a Jesus community to serve the world. Every Wednesday, we get together for the sole purpose of reviewing the message from Sunday. This is where we get the opportunity to express what we thought. Today we're discussing the sermon entitled "Relating Like Jesus, Engage." And I have with me today, coming all the way live, flew in from Cartersville. I want you guys to make some noise, give a round of applause from wherever you are for my homie and my fellow moderator, Ishak. What's going on, big bro? Come on in.
Happy wonderful Wednesday. Happy wonderful Wednesday. How you doing?
Pretty good, man. It's good to see you as always. You know, for some reasons, like every Wednesday, you just get younger and younger, you know.
Hey, I'll take that, man. Absolutely.
Yeah, you're looking good.
I appreciate it.
And also hanging with us for the first time, I want you to make a big round of applause, stand to your feet, clap your hands wherever you are for my little sister coming in for the very first time. Make some noise for Faramee.
Yeah.
What's going on? How are you?
I'm doing good. How are you guys? Excited to be on here.
Yeah, excited to have you. I mean, like I mentioned, this is your first time, and so I know you got a lot of things to get off your chest, you know, and so I'm really glad to have you, and just really appreciate you for joining us today, and looking forward to hearing a lot of what you got to say, you know. So let's get started. So I just wanted to start off by saying that I like what Pastor Lanre is doing. And I mentioned this last Wednesday, and it's just something that he's doing with this series, which is really causing us to like really take an introspective a look at ourselves, how we're functioning as a body, and how we are engaging our community, our culture, you know. Because again, the reality is, if we're not doing that, then what are we doing? You know, why do we exist? If we were to not be here for whatever the reasons may be, would the community around us miss us? And so I really like what Pastor Lanre is doing, and that's really getting us engaged. And you know, and then talking about how to relate like Jesus, and the emphasis is on engaging. So, without further ado. I wanted to just start off with a passage that I think was like the major emphasis of the message that I got, and I just want to read it and then just kind of build off from there. And I know that Ishak is going to get back. He might be facing some technical difficulties on his end, but oh, there he goes. Okay, cool. So I wanted to go ahead and read this passage. And then just kind of build from there. So this is coming from 1 John chapter 1, verses 1 to 4. 1 John chapter 1, verses 1 to 4. And in this passage, it reads, it says, "What was from the beginning, what we have heard, and what we have seen with our eyes, what we have looked at and touched with our hands concerning the word of life. And the life was manifested, and we have seen and testified and proclaimed to you the eternal life which was with the Father and was manifested to us." So just right off the bat, we know that this is talking about Jesus, who was with the Father and has been made manifest to us, the Son of God, according to 1 John chapter 3, verse 8. For this reason, that the Son of God appeared to destroy the works of the devil. That word appeared is the word manifest. We know that for this particular reason, the Son of God, he was with the Father and he has been manifested to us. In verse 3, it says, what we have seen and heard, we proclaim to you also, so that you too may have fellowship with us. And indeed, our fellowship is with the Father and his Son, Jesus Christ. So I just think, and the reason why I wanted to start off with this particular passage is because Pastor Lanre brought out some observations just from this passage. And one is the emphasis on what we have heard. The second one is what we have seen. And the third is what we've looked at. And then the fourth, what we have touched. So again, it's heard, seen, looked at, and touched, right? And so the idea is that Jesus was very engaging in his ministry to the people he was with, his disciples, and Israel at large. He was always having the demeanor of being engaged. So I just wanted to just get a feedback from you guys. What did you guys think about the sermon, and what were some things that you found to be that you highlighted from Sunday's sermon? And each let me do this. Fair me, and the reason why, because never heard you talk about sermons before. I would love to hear from you. So, yeah, I got to pick on you first, but yeah.
Okay, definitely. I thought the sermon was great, and I do enjoy Pastor Lanre's the series that he's doing. So with this particular sermon about it being about engaging within our relationships, I thought it was an important thing that he touched on about the closeness that we have within our relationships. Of course, getting to know someone, and to be loved is to be seen. So the vulnerability that you have to share, I like that he touched on that, and kind of like meeting people where they are, because you kind of have to let relationships develop. And of course, as believers, we're here to of course spread the gospel. But if you don't have these seeds planted within your community and these relationships developed, it's not going to be worthwhile. So I enjoyed that his main premise was engaging.
That's really good, and and I like the fact that you picked up on this particular phrase. To be loved is to be seen. That's deep. And I want to touch on that a little bit later, and really touch on a lot of things that you just mentioned a little bit later. But that one is the one that kind of leaked out to me. To be loved is to be seen. And so, Ishak, it's on you.
One of the things that was really good what you just said too, because that does hit home. But one of the things that really sat with me, actually, it's a couple things, but the first thing that really hit was assumption is the least denominator in knowledge. And I'd never heard that before. But when he said that we make heroes and villains out of just one sliver or a small portion of what it is that we know about somebody, and I thought about people at the workplace, how judgmental we can be sometimes, where you can already doom somebody to one thing because you may have heard something or you might have thought something about them, but not actually knowing, what it was that caused them to be that way. And I also think about myself. I think about, some of my younger years and partying and stuff. And I think about what kind of image was it that I was portraying to other people, you know what I mean? And how could I have been either misleaded or misinterpreted, And I think that there are a lot of people that deal with that are misinterpreted and not necessarily understood. And so I think that's pretty phenomenal.
I like that. Wow. Let me just do this, right? So just when you talked about how we make heroes and villains based off of assumptions, right? There's a particular passage that just kind of leaped in my mind. And this is in Isaiah chapter 53. And I just want to go to it real quick, because this right here, and for everybody, this is like my second most favorite passage, right? My first is Philippians chapter 2, that whole chapter. But my second is Isaiah 53. And both Philippians chapter 2 and Isaiah 53 is connected. And I wanted to just kind of read this real quick because this is amazing. And I try not to get preaching. This is where we just have an informal discussion. But because you had said that, I was like, man, this right here just got my attention, right? So
Yep.
in Isaiah chapter 53, as I mentioned, this is the chapter on the suffering servant. Here we have the Messiah in view in a prophetic sense, right? And look at what it says in verse 3. It says, "For he grew up before him like a tender shoot, like a root out of parched ground. He has no stately form or majesty that we should look upon him, nor appearance that we should be attracted to him." Then in verse 3 it says, "He was despised and forsaken of men, a man of sorrows and acquainted with grief, and like one from whom men hid their faces, he was despised, and we did not esteem him." Right? And then when you go down um, in verse 4, it says, "Surely our griefs he himself bore, and our sorrows he carried, yet we ourselves esteemed him stricken, smitten of God, and afflicted." So here these people are, they're seeing the Messiah being crucified, the Messiah being tortured, and the very thing that they're thinking of is that he did this, or he's going through this because of something that he did, right? In other words, in their mind, they made the one on the cross, or the one who was being inflicted with the crucifixion, they made him the villain, right? They made assumptions about him where he automatically was branded the villain. The interesting thing is he was a hero in this very moment. And so I just love the fact that you brought that out. I just, to me, it's like, man, and how often, right, do we, rather than leading with the mind of God when dealing with people, when approaching with people, how often is it that we lead with assumptions? You know, so I just, something that just came to my mind, and I really want to kind of dig in on that. Fermi, anything you wanted to add or any thoughts that you had?
Yeah, when Ishak was just talking, I think too how it is human nature to be judgmental. So I think that's why there's such an emphasis on being Christ-like and kind of like deny that part of the flesh where it's like this is judgmental, or thinking like how we just talking about assumptions and how just assuming can, you know, leave you from creating a great relationship with someone. Just the assumption of what you've been heard or what you think you might know, rather than, you know, leading with, okay, we're all children of God.
Yeah, that's good. That's good. My wife Salvation, she put it in the chat. She said yes, that definition was a hit. Assumption is the least denominator of the knowledge index.
Mm-hmm.
Wow, that's heavy. It's the least denominator. You know, when you're talking about ways, demonstrations of knowledge, assumption is the worst. Is the worst thing to appeal to demonstrate knowledge, right? And I mean, these are the things that kind of lead into the hesitation that we have when relating with people and making important decisions in our lives, right? Many times we make decisions based off of assumptions, not necessarily looking at something intently, looking at all the details, reviewing everything in and out. We just make an assumption and we run with that assumption, right? And there's a statement that talks about people who make an assumption, who like to make assumptions. They tend to make something out of themselves. I don't want to use the word because being that we church, you know, saying I don't want to get anybody in trouble. But assumptions is the least denominator of the knowledge index. Wow. Can give me an example, any one of you in your lives when you made an assumption about somebody and it ended up like backfiring on you, or maybe not even backfiring, but maybe you made an assumption about somebody, and when you had a chance to get to know somebody, the assumption that you made about them, all of a sudden you know, you got hit with the wow factor because you had an opinion about somebody, you had this assumption about somebody, and then getting to know them, all of a sudden you're like, wow, you know what? I assumed this about you, but I was wrong. Give me an example. Does anybody have an example of that?
So yes, I have an example of that. When I first moved to Georgia, when I first moved down south, so I was originally, I'm from New Jersey, and man, to be honest, and this is going to sound real terrible, but I had like a superiority complex. I felt like everything was better in, where I was from.
Yeah.
So moving here and listening to different things and talking to people, I just felt like, um, I was better,
Yeah.
And I started high school here in Georgia, right? And the guy that ended up being one of my very best friends in high school, his name is Anwar Jolani Childs.
Okay.
And he, spoke with a really southern twang. And I was like, man, I'm not, because my mom worked at the job with his mom, and she
Yeah.
introduced us, to try to get me to meet friends after I moved here. And it's like, I don't know if that's going to work, ma, blah, 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 blah. Anyway, long story short, ended up being my best friend, or one of my like 3 best friends from high school, 4 best friends from high school. And
Wow.
we've continued our relationship on. I mean, that's a very long time ago, but my initial thought was to find the people that was from where I was from, hang out with them, and be inclusive with the folks that I was familiar with. But fortunately enough, the barrier was broken down between us, man, and it worked out very, very well.
Okay. Nice.
So
Nice. Nice. Yeah.
I
Nice.
also wanted to say something real quick, though, to your point. How do you say, I'm sorry, I don't want to mispronounce. Is it Fairnme?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, good deal. But to the point she made a few moments ago, like I just think that right now in this climate that we're dealing with this election that's about to be underway, the
Mm-hmm.
dynamics of how people feel and can be judged, and can scrutinize so heavily. I look at
Yeah.
my social media and people are, if you feel this way, then don't, be my friend anymore. And if you feel that way, and I feel like
Yeah.
the climate that we're experiencing right now is very much relating to relationships and how
Yeah.
much better could it be if we had those strong relationships. So anyway, I just wanted to say that real quick because that's what it made me think of. But
Yeah.
back
Yeah.
to your point though, Lee.
No, that's really good. You know, I thought about that too, but you know how it is, in our culture, as believers, it's almost like when you touch on anything related to politics, it gets really people get really sensitive. But it's like, and I like what you said. You take a step back and you look at everything that's going on, and you're seeing how there's people, that people automatically start forming alliances, and it's almost like this spirit of division has kind of come in, and again, dealing with the issue of assumptions. People are making assumptions about this person and that person, and it's like, wow, and so yeah, I think what you said was really deep. I think what you said was really deep, and I'm glad that you pointed that out. One thing that and Fermi, I want us to go back to what you said, right, where you said that to be loved is to be seen. And I think that this is extremely important, right, because one of the challenges that we have and that we tend to have in our culture is that we tend to only demonstrate love to people who we see, right? If is like, that statement, out of sight, out of mind. And it makes it very difficult in our culture, right? It's like if you don't call me, if we haven't touched bases in a month, 2 months, 3 months, or whatever, there's people who feel like, hey, I'm not loved, you know. Has that bothered you or affected you in a certain way, just based off of your experiences? Because I think this is, and I really want to really dig into this because I think this could really help some people. But yeah.
Yeah, definitely. When I kind of wrote that down and what the message kind of made me think of was when Pastor was talking about how just the closeness of getting to know one another. And oftentimes some people like run from closeness because of the fear of like vulnerability and being seen. So that's what kind of like led me to that, because
Mhm.
in a relationship, you're going to be like, the closer you get with someone, you're going to be seen in any type of relationship, platonic, familial, romantic, whatever. So I think, and a lot of people have the fear of being vulnerable and being seen and being like known throughout. So that's where I kind of went with it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, thanks. And because I could, you know, a lot of times we tend to, when we take notes, and we think about the sermon, we tend to, there's things that are said in the sermon that immediately resonates with us. And we're like,
Mhm.
oh, you know what I'm saying? Like, you could look at my notes and we could be listening to the same sermon, right? Both of us listening to the same sermon, but then we're walking away with two different understandings of the same sermon, or things that leaped out to us, right? Something that leaped out to me may not have leaped out to you, but something that leaped out to you didn't leap out to me. And so I thought it was really deep that you put, to be loved is to be seen. And I was like, this must have spoken to you in some way, you know. It is our responsibility, as believers, to make sure that everybody, you know, within our fellowship, within our community, feels seen. And so when Pastor Lanre was talking about the ministry of Jesus, right? Jesus wasn't, he wasn't standoffish, right? Somebody who could be seen as an introvert. There's times in the scriptures where it records that he would go away and he would pray to the Father, and he would spend, he would spend moments to himself, but at the same time, he was giving of himself to people, right? He engaged people. And so, in a sense, when you were in his presence, he made you feel seen. Pastor Lowry mentioned Zacchaeus, right? In the book of Matthews, here was a guy who was short in stature, right? He had to climb up a tree to see the Messiah, and yet Jesus pointed him out. This is someone who was the most, you know, even from an occupation standpoint, this guy's a tax collector, right? He's not the most appealing person in the neighborhood. And not only is he a tax collector, he's short, but yet Jesus pointed him out and said, hey, you know, we going to your home. And I thought that was really deep, that to be loved is to be seen. Someone who may not have experienced the kind of love and community, Jesus made sure that he was seen. And so, I mean, I can go on and on. I mean, Pastor Lanre gave an example of what's his name, former President Bill Clinton, and how you can be in a room with Bill Clinton, but when you had your attention, when he had your attention, he made it. I'm sorry, when you had his attention, he made it feel as if you were the only person in the room, right? That he literally devoted his attention to you, and you felt like he was the only person in the world. And I thought that was really good, you know, and something that we definitely should think of, like trying to model, right? An attitude of giving attention to people who, and because you never know what people are dealing with, right? People deal with all kinds of stuff in their world. And so there's those who feel as if because they're unseen, they're not loved. And so giving people that attention, that's kind of what stood out to me. Isha, what about you?
What I wrote down in my notes was Jesus made people feel, and we should, like you said, model ourselves after this. W cubed, man. It's warm, wanted, and welcome.
Yeah.
And I think that that's just so crucial. You know what I mean? In engaging with people, if we can kind of bring down the barriers that we have sometimes, because I think a lot of us have kind of natural guards, you know. We want to present ourselves a particular way. If you see somebody at church, maybe they're just, you know what I mean? But when you can really be genuine and authentic, like there's a real connection there,
Yeah.
and there's a warmth that's there, you know, and
Yeah.
it also makes you feel like you're wanted to be there. And that's one of the things, like I've mentioned this on the tune up before, but man, this is really what brought it home for me at Global Outreach was I
Mhm.
felt all of those things, you know, was The engagement was so real. It was so authentic. You know, I felt warm when I walked in. I felt welcomed when I walked in, and I felt wanted when I walked in. And I believe
Wow.
that that is an ultimate testimony to the mission of the church. You know what I mean? So anyway, I'm not going to get, because I started to get emotional about that, man. But it's really something that's very powerful.
Yeah.
And so when Pastor Lanre was speaking on this and talking about Bill Clinton, I was actually thinking about Pastor Lanre in the same way. You know, like a lot of the people, like seriously, you know what I mean? Man, we were gone. My car was down for a couple of months almost, and we weren't at the
Mm.
church. Man, we got phone calls and, you know, hey, just checking in, and that's never happened before. I've been to churches my entire life, you know, and
Wow.
I'll be 43 in 2 days, and I hadn't experienced that until I got here, you know. So yeah, so he was talking about Bill Clinton, but in my mind, I was like, yeah, but this is what everybody's doing here, you know. So anyway, it was just
Wow.
really great.
Hold on. You say you'll be 43 and when?
On Friday,
Friday.
moving
Man,
on up,
happy
man,
early,
moving on
yeah,
up.
happy early birthday, man.
Hey, appreciate it. God is
I
good,
like how
man.
you just snuck that in there, you know. Man, 43 on Friday, man. Shouts out to you. That's big. Okay. You coming on up. Coming on up.
Hey,
We got some comments in the chat. My wife says, I like the handled, touched, verified. We have Nadia. Nadia says it's so important for people to know that they're being heard. Absolutely, absolutely. That is, you're 100% right. How many times do people uh, say who talk, who express themselves, but it's almost as if nobody hears what they're saying, you know, and
yep.
how you could feel almost isolated or cut off, you know, or not valued or cheapened, and that's good. That's good. We gotta explore that some more. Uh, Wife said that our relationship with Christ should be seen as we relate to others. Absolutely, absolutely. Um, you know, one of the things, the evidence of our discipleship, right? The evidence of the fact that we are believers is demonstrated in how we love one another. I mean, that's what Christ says, that they will know that you're my disciples if if they see, because they see how you love one another. And I thought that was very deep. So going back to some of the things in the chat, right? So dealing with this whole touched and verified, and this is going back to First John chapter 1, verse 1 to 4, where it says that what we have looked at and touched with our hands, it gives the idea of observed and observed deeply, so in other words, there was nothing about the life of Jesus that wasn't put under scrutiny or examination, right? And here they can walk away with the idea that this guy here is eternal life. Truly, he's eternal life, because we've examined him, we observed him, we saw how he was, he communicated with people, right? We saw how he talked to the widows, he talked to, and how he dealt with the needy, right? How he spoke to those who were heartbroken. We've seen how he navigated discussions where the disenfranchised in the community, who were being ostracized by the religious leaders. We've seen how Jesus made them feel included. How, I mean, think about it, right? You had the Samaritan woman in John chapter 4, a woman who understood her place within society. She understood that she was at the bottom of the bottom, right? She was not highly regarded in a culture or amongst a people who are already discounted, right? And Jesus took time to discuss with her, was even willing to take a cup of water from her, right? Which was something that was literally forbidden culturally. Jews had no dealings with Samaritans, and yet Jesus made this woman feel special. I mean, think about it. the most holy, the holy of holies, right? We're talking about the divine presence embodied, right? Speaking with someone who is literally at the bottom of the totem pole in the culture, who will be seen as filthy, dirty, and disgusting. Nobody wants to be around her. And yet the very presence of God, embodied, went to speak with her and was willing to take a drink from her. That should cause us to pause. So,
Absolutely.
Yeah. Go ahead, bro.
No, that was one of the things I had written in my notes as well, and highlighted because and really it's because of how Samaritans were viewed, and she was a woman. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But the fact that Jesus gave such a perfect blueprint on how to walk this thing out.
Absolutely.
And with the touch, the hearing, the verified, and the touch, it gave us a great example of how to allow people to experience us completely, right?
Yeah.
When we're
Yeah.
walking out here, when we're talking out here, we should be allowing others to experience us completely, right? The
Yes.
word says that we've seen and we've looked upon, right? So in the notes it was, I hear Jesus, is we hearing the living word, right? We took the time to study and observe a deep and intimate study. I see Jesus. So if we're allowing, that's why it's so important to engage, because the more we engage, the more we can represent Christ likeness.
Yes.
And the more we can be an example, the more we can just be an example of it. But also, the more we can do the actions that are required to hit that standard, man. I just feel like this engagement message hits home on so many levels and
Yeah.
is so needed. And the transparency of it. I don't think that there are enough folks really willing to walk out the transparency of it.
Yeah.
Sometimes I believe that people want to come off as being almost perfect, you know what I mean, or
Yeah.
holy, you know what I mean.
Yeah.
But sometimes you got to be able to see the the good, the bad, and the ugly, so that you can understand the real. You know what I mean? And
Absolutely.
if you can still experience those things, if you can still walk through life with those things and hold your head high as a child of God and as a believer in Christ, then that's where people that may be struggling in their faith, that's where people that don't have any faith, that's where people that don't understand what it is to be a believer, that's where minds can be changed and where hearts can be changed, is by the examples that they see. So that was just, it really just hit me in the stomach, man, like just like a two-piece with the biscuit almost.
It
Yeah, it was really
was
great.
that good, huh?
Yeah, man.
Awesome. Fair. What are your
Yeah,
thoughts?
I think one of the notes I wrote down was meeting people where they are.
Yes.
And I think that is super important. It ties into what you guys have been saying, and how, of course, it's important to go to church, but church isn't like limited to the four walls. It's like your walk, that's how you minister to people, seeing where they're at. And fortunately, I've like grown up going to WalkFan, going to global outreach. So, but not everyone has that same experience of being in a church and having a church home. And so meeting people where they're at, even maybe they have like reservations about Christ based on their past experiences. So I think it's super important being that beacon. And one of the other like things I wrote down was consideration, thoughtfulness, and patience. When you're like building these relationships, it's important to have that, and like for any relationship, but when you're deepening a relationship and trying to like bring people to Christ, having those virtues. So I think it all kind of ties in. So
Yeah.
Can you repeat that one more time? I'm trying to get that note. I'm trying to get that. You said consideration, thoughtfulness, and what was it? Friendliness?
I said patience.
Patience. Ooh, hold on a second. I got to get that. Consideration, thoughtfulness, and patience, because that's exactly okay. because that goes exactly into what Pastor was talking about, what we were talking about with the understanding, right? If
Right.
you can understand someone when you give them that consideration, when you're thoughtful about where they're coming from, and when you exercise patience as opposed to assuming, like we were speaking on earlier, man, that's
It's also full circle. And I think it's also funny how, Uncle, you were like talking about how when you're doing a sermon or you're listening to a sermon, you might not always take the same things. So I think it's so interesting and impactful, like even going back to sermons and seeing what your spirit aligns with, what you pick up from. So
Yeah, that's absolutely. I appreciate that. Some really good comments. I like that. So here in the comment section, Selwyn says, actions always speak louder than words. Jesus was all action. You're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. He didn't just preach it, he lived it. You know what I'm saying? Like, and you got to think of, so, and this is what's beautiful, right? In First John was written by one of the apostles. It's believed to have been written by one of the apostles, the Apostle John. He was an apostle, but he was first a disciple. And a disciple is a student. And a student is one who learns from their rabbi. The goal is that whatever the rabbi does, however the rabbi lives, I want to model it, right? And you can literally tell who you can literally, I mean, the goal was that whatever the life that the rabbi modeled was the life that the students would model, and you can tell what school these students were from because of how they live. So even when the rabbi had passed on, you knew that these were students of the rabbi because look at how they live. They walk just like their rabbi. They talk just like their rabbi. They live just like their rabbi. So when Jesus says that, that they will know that you're my disciples because of how you love one another. Well, Jesus was the first demonstration of that, right? Because it was how he loved. So his demonstration of love was his expectation that they would demonstrate love. And so you would know that they were his disciples because of how they modeled everything that Jesus did, right? And even for us, right? 2000 something years later, we're required to model that same kind of love and that same type of attitude and character. Why? Because our rabbi is Jesus, right? We are like the great grand disciples of Jesus. Right. And and so when people see us, they know what school we're from. We're Christians. We're followers of Christ. We're disciples of Jesus Christ. We live how he lived. And so really great point, Selwyn, for bringing that out, that actions always speak louder than words, and Jesus was all action. Tania says, I feel the same way, Brother Ishak, the same way as Brother Ishak, coming to Go Church. I get emotional too about it. Never had this experience as well. That's wonderful. Thank you, Tania. And I'm gonna tell you that speaks a lot. Because I'm not saying that we always get it right as a church. We don't. I mean, we're people, and people make mistakes. There's things that we fall short on. So it's always great to hear when people tell us, where we get it right, because really, honestly, Go Church is nothing without each and every one of us, right? We are all what makes up Go Church. So how I treat you as a fellow brother and sister at Go Church says a lot about Go Church. How Pastor Lanre treats me says a lot about Go Church. How Fermi treats Brother Isha, it says a lot about Go Church. And so definitely big ups to Go Church for modeling that. And I pray, my prayer is that we continue to model that kind of attitude and relationship, especially to those who may be coming for the first time, because you never know, what I'm saying? You never know. It's not about what we can get from people. It's all about what we can give to people. We all have to have the attitude. What can I do to my fellow brothers and sisters, not about what I can get for them, but what I can do for them. Because that's what Christ did. Christ first gave. And so we are beneficiaries of him first giving. And so we're called to, like Selwyn says, Jesus was all action. We're called to live out that action, those actions of being selfless and giving. I like that. Pastor Lanre mentioned something that and we talked about this when he started his series, right? And talked about how is it possible to love from afar, right? When people say, "Hey, I love you, but I love you from a distance," and no, he says that love, and I remember he said that love is a contact sport. Man, let me tell you that right there should be the phrase of the year. You know what I'm saying? Love is a contact sport. I like that. Those zingers, you know. What are your thoughts, or anything that was in your notes that you felt that related to, hey, what were your thoughts?
Well, I mean, kind of to encapsulate a lot of what was being said, but Pastor said it a couple of weeks ago also, when he said, don't tell me about how deep you are spiritually. Like, I can see how deep you are spiritually by how you interact with, how you engage, and that engagement is action, and so, but that's 100% it, man. Like, because love is a contact sport. I thought that was a two-piece with a biscuit, because we were talking about that in the last one too. That really, I said that twice now, but that's really, that it really means everything, because the action of love is what we're called to do, not the feeling of, not the feeling of love. We can have emotional feeling and care in our hearts for people, and that's great, but that's not the end of it. That's not where it stops. That's really is a small portion of it in my mind. Like, it's really only about the actions, because sometimes the action requires that you love through the or through the emotional feeling of it. Sometimes you can feel terrible about whatever the situation is, or maybe whatever the person did to you, or maybe what you did to the person, but you still have to love through that. You know what I mean? And love does not start or stop with feelings. I think love starts and stops and is finished with action.
Yes.
Love
really,
is definitely
really good.
Love is definitely.
No, sorry. Go ahead.
I was like, love is definitely an action, because feelings will fade, but the action of loving is continuous. And one thing I've always heard, and I think is pretty true, would be that love would be the opposite of fear. So when you think of the things that would prevent you from loving, there could be fear behind that. So.
Wow. Deep things. Wow. And on that note, because we believe that love is an action, if you love Go Church, and you've been watching for some time, and you said, "Hey, I'm looking for a particular church home." For those that are out there, man, feel free to stop by and check us out on Sundays at Go Church. And of course, if you love Go Church and you love what we're doing, feel free to give. We have the QR code at the top of the screen. You can scan that QR code and give towards Go Church. Love is an action. So if you love Go Church, you can definitely represent it in your givings, and we appreciate all the offerings that come through that help to support the ministry. And we got a message from Brother Adiola. He says, to Fermi's point, I just want to add this scripture, 1 John chapter 4, verse 20, and I'm paraphrasing. You cannot love God without loving the people you see. That's the equation. Love people, love God. You're absolutely right. Let me tell you, the very heart, and Jesus talked about this, right? When they asked Jesus, what is the two most important commandment? What is the most important commandment? Jesus says to love God with all your soul, your heart, and your mind. Love the Lord your God. Matter of fact, and we don't really capture this well in the actual English, but it was very specific. It was the Lord. There is the name Yahweh. Love Yahweh your God with all your heart, your mind, your soul. In other words, be solely devoted to him. And then what he said, the second one is just like the first. Love your neighbors as you love yourselves. Right? So Brother Adil, thank you so very much. You're absolutely right. The greatest commandment is to love God, and then the next one is like it, love people. You cannot say that you love God and you don't love people, or especially if you don't love his people. Jesus said in another place, he says, how can you say that you love God who you have not seen, but hate your brother who you see all the time?
Right.
Man. And love is a contact sport. How does your brother or your sister know that you love them? How often do you call your brother or your sister? You know, how often do you seek to meet the needs of your brother or your sister? Right. And it's not just for those who are just say, well, nobody has called me, nobody's reached out to me. Those who feel that way, how often have you reached out? It's a contact sport. It's a two-way thing, you know? Man, I can go on and on. Go ahead, bro.
I got a question to present. What about situations where you might feel like you've extended yourself and you're being taken advantage of, right? Where somebody will take, or and hasn't necessarily learned to appreciate or to even learn to love themselves. How do you handle those situations, and where is the line drawn from loving to abuse? And I don't mean like physical abuse. I'm thinking very specifically about a situation. I have a family member that I let come stay with me for several months, and didn't have to pay a single dollar. It's like, hey, come on, don't worry about it. Save your money. Get right. Get yourself right. Come get a church with us. Come do whatever. Never came to church. Never anything. But that was fine. Leaving. My wife would leave a plate in the microwave, so every time he came home, there was food. Didn't have to pay a single cent. You know what I mean? But it got to a point where, okay, now I'm just taking care of you. You know what I mean? Like, you're grown. And you have to do more. And it's like, I got to a place where I was finally had to draw a line in the sand. It's like, I still love in my heart, and I'm still willing to help and do what I can do for, but I had to kick him out. I had to kick him out because he was just taking too much from the house and not contributing and not bringing anything to the table. And that was not what the goal was. I didn't want the finances or anything else, but wanted, to see him begin to move in the right directions, And so in situations where people are taken advantage of, maybe there's, husbands that are taking advantage of the kindness of their wives, or there's family members or their employers, or whatever the situation is that might present, itself. I know that Jesus said to forgive 7 times 70, but sometimes it's not something to necessarily forgive. There's just some actions that need to be corrected. And so what are your thoughts on that? I just wanted to get some thoughts on that.
Well, first and foremost, I want to apologize for taking advantage of you and your household like that. You know what I'm saying? No, I'm just playing. But on a serious note, I mean, I think that, in Pastor Bank, OG Pastor had made this, he had mentioned this, where he talked about how it's a challenge of the person. You can see that person is challenged in the area of love, So in other words, you've done everything that you have done. You've demonstrated and you expressed love to that person, and that person had failed to reciprocate that love back and appreciate it. And it just really is an emphasis on the fact that person doesn't understand what love is and is challenged in that particular area. And I think it's always important that as we are doing things for people, and that when we feel it, like, hey, this thing is starting to become an issue or starting to bubble up, like this right here bothers me, it's important to address that, right?
100%.
You know, like in other words, where it's like, hey, you know, brother. Matter of fact, here's one thing that I think that I like Pastor for this. Pastor would do stuff where he would explain why he's doing this. So in the case of the guy that was staying at your home, it's more like, hey, the reason why I let you stay here, and you know, it's not something that you wait till the last minute till you fed up and you kick him out, but you know, hey, the reason why, you know, we're allowing you to stay here for this time and no food or whatever, we just wanted to show you the love of God, you know. We want you because we love you, you know. This is not something that was easy for us. This is something that we're doing just simply out of the, you know, saying out of the love that God has given us. And we wanted to extend that to you so that you understand and can appreciate the love of God. In other words, you've taken it from where you're just simply giving to now it's a teaching moment. Right.
Yeah.
And then the command, hey, just as we're doing this for you, I want you to pay it forward to the next person. Make sure that when you get on your feet and you're able to do that, you do it for the next guy. You know, it's kind of like this thing I think about when you go to McDonald's, right? And where there's a guy that orders food and he says, hey, for the car behind us, here's $20 put towards that person's tab, right? And so the next car that's ordering has no idea what the car in front of them did, right? And they go, wow, this person was willing to pay for my meal. Okay, then they pay it forward by paying for the next car behind them. And if every car does that, you don't know. It's like the idea is that there's so many people who have been touched by that simple act of kindness. And so it's not simply just saying, hey, demonstrate love and do loving things, but make it a teaching moment. Because that's what Jesus did, right? Jesus loved, but he also taught why he loved, right? And then they were not expected to pay it forward, demonstrate that love to the next people who may have been undeserving, who may have been unrighteous, who may have not been in a position to have received love. They want you know, hey, demonstrate that to the next person, and then command that person to demonstrate it to the next person. Hey, that's how we got the Bible.
Yeah, it is.
That's how we got the Bible. It was the acts of Jesus, right? Demonstrated by the apostles, where the apostles wrote it down, along with those who were with the apostles. They wrote the stuff down and they passed it on to the next people, and then the next people, and the next people. And here we are 2,000 years later talking about Jesus and what he did for the world. So yeah, absolutely. That's how I would see it. Really good question, man. Really good question. Yeah. Sister Fairmy, what's on your mind?
To the question I was just posed, I would say it's definitely important to have a spirit of discernment and, you know, talk to God about what's on your mind. Just in the same way that we love others, it's important to love ourselves and there's nothing wrong with having boundaries and things of that nature to make sure that we're loving each other effectively. So I would say that.
Yeah. Okay. And that's really good, because when you think about it, you can't perfect. So again, look at the model. Love God, right? And the way that you love God should now spill to how you love your neighbors. And the caveat is that you will love your neighbors like you love yourself. So the question is, how do you love yourself? Right? If you're not healthy towards yourself, how can you demonstrate your love towards your neighbor? So in other words, the idea is that God fixed you, right? You experience the love of God. God's love has surrounded you. God's love has touched you in a way to now you're healthy enough to love people like you love yourself, because you have experienced the love of God. So what you said is extremely important. But go ahead, Brother Isha. Yeah.
No, I was just throwing in those little ad libs because you're 100% right. Yeah, I agree with that. I definitely.
Yeah. Yeah. And Brother Adiola said he's been there a couple of times. You cannot do more than yourself. Only have people stay with you for a few days and make a plan ahead of time before they come. And I guess in other words, lay out the rules before they arrive, before they get settled. Good stuff. Good stuff. Hey, listen, I just want to put it out there. We're drawing close to the end of this discussion. I put it there in the chat. My email address for anybody that's interested in wanting to be in the next in the next discussion, right? The next Tune Up podcast. Please hit me up by email, and that way I can get you in there. Say, hey, Brother Lee, I like what's going on, and I want to participate. Definitely put your name in the and email me your name, your contact information, and we'll reach out to you. Definitely want to do that, because we want this to be something in which everybody's connected. So. But yeah, so as you do that, I look forward to seeing those responses. And before we close out, any thoughts on your mind, anything that wasn't touched on that you want to touch on?
No, this is a great first podcast to be a part of.
Okay, so that means I can count on seeing you again.
Right.
Done deal. Brother Ishak, what about you, sir?
I just wanted to co-sign on reaching out to you through the email. This is a great opportunity to engage, right? This is what the message is about, and this is a great platform to be able to do so. So step outside of your comfort zone sometimes, and then come on in the room. That's
yes.
So
absolutely. And I just want to say to you guys, thank you for making this Wednesday night so much fun. I could not have done this without you guys, and so thank you for volunteering to participate, taking away 30 minutes, 45 minutes of your afternoon to do this. Really appreciate you guys. Love you guys. And for everybody that's watching, definitely stay tuned in. We will be back again next week, Wednesday. But before next week, Wednesday, want to see you in church on Sunday. If you haven't come in person, please come in person. If you are unable to come in person, please make sure that you tune in, because we are doing big things each and every time we broadcast and meet. This is amazing. Also, this Friday, before I forget, we do have our monthly prayer and fasting, which will take place this Friday. Please show up. I look forward to seeing you there. So please come, fill the building. And again, thank you guys so much. So I'll see you this Friday for praying and fasting at 7:30. And of course, Sunday morning, look forward to seeing you in person. And of course, we'll be back next week on Wednesday for the next Tune Up podcast. God bless every one of you, and take care. Have a wonderful rest of your evening. May the grace of the Lord Jesus Christ, the love of God, and the sweet fellowship of the Holy Spirit be with each and every one of you. God bless. Thank you, everyone.
You've been watching the Tune Up. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to this Bible study. And until next week, don't forget to check in and get your tune up.